This Week in Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick. From Microbe TV, this is TWiV. This Week in Virology, episode 1244, recorded on August 14, 2025. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you're listening to the podcast all about viruses. Joining me today from New York, Daniel Griffin.
Hello, everyone.
You are still in the state of New York, so it still works, right?
Yeah, still in the state of New York. I headed out a little east. I felt like I needed to spend a little time with my parents, so it's been good. And also, my wife's here, her sister, their three kids, our three kids. We've got the whole gang. We don't actually have my brother-in-law, who's stationed in Mogadishu in Somalia, so he couldn't quite make the trip. But otherwise, we've got the crew.
What's on your bow tie today, Daniel?
Prions.
Prions. Wow. Yeah. I couldn't tell. They looked different last time.
So I have a couple Prion bow ties. How many people do you know have multiple Prion bow ties? This is my orange Prion bow tie. I also have a yellow Prion bow tie.
Can't have too many Prion bow ties.
I'm going to agree with you. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to start with my quotation, which is very much appropriate. And this is Margaret Atwood, The Handmaid's Tale. Ignoring isn't the same thing as ignorance. You have to work at it. And I think the it in that sentence is ignorance is what you actually have to work at to achieve. So
why would you pick a quote like that, Daniel?
Well, let's get into it, shall we? So we have a little bit of a headline, connect any dots that people feel like they want to. FDA regulator reinstalled less than 2 weeks after White House ouster. People have to tell me, like, you never know, like, is this still true? Is it happening? Is it not happening? But we read in the Washington Post that at the FDA's request, Dr. Vijay Prasad is resuming leadership of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. We hear this from the Department of Health and Human Services spokesman, Andrew Nixon. Is this true? Is he back? Do you know, Vincent?
I don't know, but I've heard in many news sources that he's back, yes. So.
But I heard he said he wanted to spend more time with his family. I guess that was enough, a week.
It's a lie. It was, nothing these people say is truth. It's all lies.
All right. Well, along the same lines and along the same sort of spirit, unfortunately, FDA or reports suggest FDA may not reauthorize Pfizer COVID vaccine for young kids. So the U.S. FDA has signaled that it might not renew the emergency use authorization for Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for children ages 6 months to 4 years old for the upcoming respiratory virus season. This may limit the supply of vaccines for the youngest kids. This was reported in The Guardian, and it was based on a CDC email that was obtained. And actually, there have been several. I think Purva Mandavili has an article talking about this. But what do we read? That pulling the Pfizer EUA would remove the only COVID-19 vaccine approved for all children from the U.S. market. The Moderna vaccine is approved only for children with one or more health conditions. The Novavax vaccine is cleared only for use in children aged 12 years and older. These are sort of subtleties but the email told health officials that the CDC was in talks with Moderna about rapidly increasing its vaccine supply for young children. But we're going to hit some science here in a minute, but we've repeatedly talked about a number of studies, sort of a famous Japanese study, where a lot of the kids, and in some of the studies, half or more of those kids that end up in hospital, that end up not surviving, were previously healthy. So this is sort of the Vijay Prasad. Let's restrict access and only give access to children with one or more health conditions.
What's the logic behind this, Daniel?
So the talking point for this crowd, one, is to minimize the impact of COVID on children. We've talked about that. Well over 1,000 children in the U.S. alone died of COVID. We've talked about the thousands that have ended up in the hospital, all those that have ended up in the ICU, the 1% or so that don't fully recover and end up with long COVID. And then maybe I think also along the same lines is that about half of these kids, this is true for COVID, this is true for flu, were apparently completely fine before they got sick. And that just doesn't go with this narrative that, oh, it's only like, people with weak character and immune issues that need these vaccines. I mean, I was listening to The Immune with Shane Crotty earlier today. I still have a little more to go. But, vaccines are the thing that we universally recommend to all people, even healthy people. And it's because you can't really tell ahead of time, who wouldn't potentially benefit. There's always, and it's a percent of folks that should they get the infection, they don't do well. And the vaccine can help those folks.
So there's no justification for not letting young children have vaccine, basically.
There's no good science. There's no good data. I mean, the argument from their point, might be sort of a number needed to vaccinate to get the benefit you're after. But these are the most cost-effective, safest interventions we have for keeping these young kids sick. And for these young kids, like coming into the world like that, particularly at 6 months to 4 years of age, for them, it's not 5 years into a pandemic. For them, it's welcome to the pandemic. I mean, this is the first time they're seeing SARS-CoV-2. And those, the hospitalization rate for those kids, as we've repeatedly discussed, is on par with the number, of hospitalizations per person that we see in the over 65. So if you're going to say over 65 can have vaccines, this is also a population where you should say, yes, the 6 to 4, they should have access to that protection as well. Here's an article. It just hit my email this morning. I go through these table of contents. And so, I got up early this morning and came across the article, Factors Associated with Pediatric COVID-19 Mortality, a Pediatric Investigators Collaborative Network on Infections in Canada, PICNIC study. Clever, published in JPIDS. I wish Sarah Dong was here to give us a rating, a scale of 5. But background here, right, as we've talked about, large international cohorts have reported inpatient pediatric mortality of up to 23% among those with severe COVID-19. COVID-19 was the leading infectious cause of death for children in the United States from 2019 to 2022. The objective of this study was to determine factors associated with death due to COVID-19 in Canada and Caribbean countries. Results of a retrospective multi-case control study, 9 sites in 4 Canadian provinces, 2 sites in the Caribbean, from April 1st, 2020 through December 31, 2022. There were, in this series, 26 COVID-19 attributable deaths identified, including 21 at 7 of 9 Canadian sites, 5 at 1 Caribbean site. There were 3,777 SARS-CoV-2 positive inpatients across the 10 sites for a mortality rate of 0.7%. So, I mean, first off, that's encouraging, right? This is a study where we're seeing much lower than that 23%. But again, we're seeing deaths in children. These are directly attributed to COVID, and those deaths were occurring, most of the deaths occurred in children under 5, right? The kids that are now losing access to that protection. So most deaths occurred in children 5 years and younger, and the vaccine status was available in 8 of the 11 deaths that occurred after the vaccines were approved. 75% were unvaccinated. So they did a univariate conditional logistic regression, assessing predictors of pediatric COVID-19 mortality. So first, we're seeing that correlation where the majority, 75% of these kids were unvaccinated. But then they tried to look at other factors. And, and this does suffer from a small sample size, but really not reaching statistical significance on a lot of these. It looked like there was a little bit of a trend towards issues of males not doing as well as females. Looked like a trend toward folks having a comorbidity, not reaching statistical significance, but a trend, cardiac conditions, and a few others. So really, I mean, this is sort of this attempt to try to find out, can we identify them, and not really finding, really basically a way of saying, here are the people not at risk. And again, reinforcing that we are seeing children and have been seeing children die of COVID-19. Okay, Legionella, an update on Legionella. I feel like I should keep checking this page as we broadcast. So I'm going to do that right now in real time. Let's see if we've had any any updates here, and we hear 99 confirmed cases, 4 deaths, 17 currently hospitalized. So this is as of August 14th. So that's, actually you could see, you're going to update that for me. This is awesome.
Wow.
Okay. So and that's just another day, right? One day from the 13th, I'll make that the 14th. A number of more cases, a number of more deaths, currently hospitalized. So the Legionella outbreak is going strong. I did a piece for Columbia where we discuss this association with the cooling towers in parts of the city. Remember, this is something you inhale. And if you don't test for it, if you don't think about it, you may not get the proper treatment. And this is not necessarily, the standard treatment. This is a specific treatment. Even if it's, selecting the right medication, it's also the question of extending the duration. So keep this on the radar in those areas. It's Legionella time of year. I think another thing that's actually come up, I think this may reflect on our listenership, but Chikungunya vaccine, right? So May 9th, the FDA had issued a safety communication informing the public that the FDA and the CDC recommended a pause in the use of Ixchiq. That was the attenuated Chikungunya vaccine in individuals 60 years of age and older. While they did some post-marketing analysis, they were investigating a number of post-marketing reports, serious adverse events, neurological, cardiac. At the time of May 9th, they recommended this pause, but basically now they've removed the recommended pause, and we're going to go forward with that. So we good timing here, I guess, on improving access here, because we are having some chikungunya concerns around the globe. So for our listeners not familiar, chikungunya, it's a viral illness. You get it from getting bitten by a mosquito. And the CDC is reporting and actually issued an advisory regarding an outbreak of chikungunya in Guangdong province, China. Most cases are in Foshan City, and vaccination is recommended for travelers. And 2 chikungunya vaccines are approved for use in the United States. We have the attenuated vaccine, that's the Ixchiq, and then we also have Vimkunya. This is a virus-like particle vaccine. And so we've got those out there for folks. And I've got a nice map here, which shows Guangdong right there on the coast, and Foshan a little bit inland there. But not just to focus on China, I'll get some hate mail if we do that. There also are chikungunya travel health notices for outbreaks that are going on in Bolivia, Kenya, Madagascar. How do you pronounce that? Mauritius?
Mauritius.
Mayotte, Reunion, Somalia, Sri Lanka, and basically giving a bunch of areas where they actually say we have elevated risk. So Brazil, Colombia, India, Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, Philippines, and Thailand. So chikungunya is actually quite a thing. So talk to your travel doctor. It'll be becoming a stronger recommendation whenever you are out there traveling. Another exciting paper, and this goes along the lines of, I'll say, a developing story of what a great thing it is to get that Zoster vaccine. So the article, adjuvanted recombinant Zoster vaccine is effective against herpes zoster ophthalmicus and is associated with lower risk of acute MI and stroke in adults 50 years and older, published in CID. Clinical infectious disease. So a little background, our listeners may know about this, but getting shingles, getting herpes zoster, and getting herpes zoster involving the eye actually are associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular complications. So having acute MI or having a stroke. So here they looked at maybe that vaccine can have some impact, and they're looking at adults 50 years and older at Kaiser Permanente, Southern California. So they conducted a matched cohort analysis of adults 50 years of age or older who received 2 doses, and they followed, the normal schedule, so 4 weeks to 6 months apart. They matched them 1 to 4 with unvaccinated folks, and then they followed them. They found that among 102,766 2-dose vaccinated, and 411,064 unvaccinated. The adjusted odds ratio were for reducing getting shingles in your eyeball, about a 73% reduction, ending up hospitalized with an MI, a 28% reduction, and ending up hospitalized with a stroke, a 42% reduction. So more reasons, right? You got to keep yourself from getting dementia, a stroke, an MI, or shingles in your eyeball.
Yeah, it's good. It's very, very promising.
It really sort of makes you want to go out and get vaccinated.
Yeah, I've got my shingles vaccine already. I'm set. I got 2 doses.
Excellent. All right, bird flu. This is I put in some extra photos, but I love the graphics of this article. So, bird flu has arrived in Antarctica. That's my headline. But the article tracking HPAIV, so highly pathogenic avian influenza virus H5, through a geographic survey of Antarctic seabird populations, was published in Scientific Reports. I'm just going to call it bird flu H5, but here, an extensive survey for the detection of highly pathogenic avian influenza virus H5, so H5 bird flu, its seabird species, was conducted between December 2023 and January 2024 in 13 breeding sites spanning from the northeastern sector of the Antarctic Peninsula to the Ross Sea, including the coasts of Bellinzausen Sea and the Amundsen Sea. I should practice these names ahead of time, but I remember Amundsen because he was one of those like great explorers that I just loved reading stories about. So 9 individuals from the Pigocellus adelae and Lusocarbo bransfieldensis we'll talk about. So basically you've got an adelae penguin, and then you've got this other sort of like a cormorant type of bird. We'll go into the details, but tested positive for the H5 highly pathogenic avian influenza in 2 different locations in the Antarctic Peninsula. So just to spend a little time on these 2 wonderful, cute little birds, and I pasted in some photos that I pulled off the internet. But the adelaide penguin is a species of penguin common along the entire coast of the Antarctic continent. And the other bird, the Antarctic shag, sometimes referred to as the imperial cormorant, the king cormorant, and a bunch of other things, the Antarctic cormorant, is the only species of the cormorant family found in the Antarctic. And it looks like a cormorant, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It's got that like characteristic shape. So basically, this study is suggesting the possibility of the first cases of the highly pathogenic avian influenza H5 in the Antarctic continent, and also potentially adding 2 new species to the list of infected species.
So do you know if they did, if they sacrificed these animals for sampling, or were they sick? I'm curious to know if they had any symptoms.
Yes, they weren't sick. That was really an interesting thing. So so they made a comment. These were not sick. I don't believe they were actually sacrificing. They were just sampling this, and they actually say none of the birds sampled, right? So these are not necropsy. They're not killing them. But 115 birds were sampled. They do PCR test results, and then they find some of the Adeline penguins and some of the cormorants were positive. Nearly all the suspected infections were on Beagle Island, which is close to the Danger Islands at the northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. None of the birds showed clinical signs of influenza infection. And they even checked on them a couple months later, and they still were foraging and happy and doing all right.
They probably remembered them. Hey, you stuck that thing up my butt.
Yeah, they scrambled. They waddled away a little bit quicker, right? They came back the next time. But I love the pictures, right? They've got a picture of the ship. There's this icebreaker, and then they've even got the people in the lab. I'm trying to figure out are they in the lab on the ship? I think so. I think this is actually a photo. Yeah,
it's a
the
really
wet lab.
Big ship. It looks like a cruise ship.
Oh, it's
right?
Beautiful. It's very similar to a cruise ship, I think, that National Geographic uses down there. So, all right. Very cool stuff. All right. Measles. I'm disturbed here. And you're going to see in a second why. So We had heard that starting on the 25th of June, right, the CDC was going to limit updates. They were only going to update this page of how many cases of measles were going on in the U.S. only on Wednesdays. We knew that as of July 1st, we had more cases in the U.S. that really ever, since we've gotten this, down and controlled. But here, I go to check yesterday, I checked today, notice right on the top, the data on this page will not be updated on Wednesday, August 13th, 2025. CDC will resume updates as soon as possible. So no updates. I don't know. Why are we not hearing what's going on with measles?
Yeah, they're trying to control the flow of information. That would be my guess without any data.
It's worrisome because we've been talking for a while about when are we going to go to this page and there'll be no new information and something like this. And that's what we got. The Canadians, however.
But we could presumably go to the states, the individual states, and get numbers, no?
I think that's what we'd have to do. Yeah.
So someone could write a program to scrape, someone could write a program, some listener write a program to scrape all of these sites and make a tally on a website. That could be done.
Yeah, and send it to us each Thursday, and we'll insert that because we can't get the information from the CDC. Then, help us get that information because it didn't stop, right? It's not sudden like it stopped, and also we're very concerned about what's going to happen in the fall when the kids go back to school.
So, did you notice there's a case now in Idaho?
Oh my gosh, there actually was a case in Idaho. How could that happen? They agreed to get tested.
So it was positive wastewater last week, and now they have a case, and just in time for school.
Wow. Yeah, not good. And Canada, another 153 new cases. We're up to 4,548 measles cases. And that's actually old data. That's data July 27th up to August 2nd. So that's almost 2 weeks old. So measles is still going strong. All right. Flu, another pediatric death was added to the total from last winter because we're still tallying. So total of 267 children died of flu last winter. And I want to point out, kids died of flu. They didn't die because they had wet hair. They didn't die because they were going to die anyway. No. This is the highest number of pediatric deaths reported in any non-pandemic flu season since this condition became reportable. So we will have vaccines coming up in the fall. And remember, the majority of these kids were not vaccinated. I was supposed to look at the connection between the RSV vaccine and Guillain-Barré in South Africa. I see it in my notes, so I will next week. I promise I'll highlight that. But COVID, not good news, Vincent.
Yeah, I see it's popping up more.
Yeah, you can really see it headed up. It's
very puzzling to me. It's a weird behavior.
It really is. It's the strangest thing, and you could see it's a lot of it's being driven. I put it, looking at sort of state level. So really, high activity in a lot of the West. So California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Texas, very high activity down there in Louisiana. So really starting to see a lot of areas where we've got high and very high activity now. So, and I hear from my inside sources, sort of the percent positive testing, and one of our testing centers in the Northwest, really high percent positivities. And, I made the criticism, hey, you're not testing enough. And their comment was people are refusing testing. So I don't want to get that positive test and have to not have the opportunity to go to that party and spread it to their, friends and family. So. All right up front in the COVID section, we have the 2025 Clinical Practice Guideline Update by the IDSA, the Infectious Disease Society of America, on the treatment and management of COVID-19. And just they hit on just a few topics like PEMGARDA for pre-exposure prophylaxis, vilobelimab for critical illness, and abatacept or infliximab for severe or critical illness. This is published in CID. Big thing I will say is, they asked this question and sort of bring this to people's attention because I feel like it's underutilized. But in moderately or severely immunocompromised persons, 12 years or older, should PEMGARDA compared to no PEMGARDA be used for pre-exposure prophylaxis? And the recommendation basically is yes. And they go through and they say, it's conditional recommendation. We do suggest pre-exposure prophylaxis. And then they go through like, what are the different risk categories? What are the health conditions or therapeutics that might put a person in these categories for these recommendations? All right. So remember, that's PEMGARDA. All right. Early viral phase. So you actually agree, you get tested, you find out you have COVID, you're at risk of progression. So no big changes here. The wildly overpriced Paxlovid, remdesivir, molnupiravir, and in some cases convalescent plasma. And then the early inflammatory, if you progress, then still looking at steroids, anticoagulation, pulmonary support, remdesivir, and in some cases immune modulation. All right. We actually have... I stole this right from the deep dive, the article, which I thought was really a really great article. So, the article, Respiratory Viral Infections Awaken Metastatic Breast Cancer Cells in Lungs, published in Nature, and the subject of a deep dive on TWiV 1243, Capitalism, COVID, and Cancer. What a title. And I'll leave a link into that. But listen to that for the deep dive, but I just wanted to make sure this got a little spotlight here, because we always talk about the difference between long COVID and post-COVID conditions. So are there things that you get triggered because you got COVID and now you've got this problem? So in here, maybe you had cancer, now you're in remission, everything's great. You get COVID, you get a viral infection. Can it awaken those dormant disseminated cancer cells? So let's talk about this. So in this research that Vincent did a really nice deep dive into, they demonstrate in mice that flu and SARS-CoV-2 infections lead to loss of the pro-dormancy phenotype in breast dormant disseminated cancer cells. I feel like there should be two Ds, right? DDCC, so they're dormant disseminated cancer cells. I noticed that in the lung, causing the dormant disseminated cancer cells to proliferate within days of infection, and really this massive expansion of carcinoma cells into metastatic lesions within 2 weeks. So they show that these transitions and expansions are interleukin-6 dependent. They show that the dormant disseminated cancer cells impair lung T cell activation. And there actually is this interesting role of CD4 positive T cells that sustain the pulmonary metastatic burden after the flu infection by inhibiting CD8 T cell activation and cytotoxicity. So really kind of this interesting issue, are those CD4 cells acting as like Tregs, somehow, allowing the tumor to proliferate and keeping those T cells from doing their job. And crucially, right, this is not out of left field. These experimental findings align with human observational data. And so in here we have analysis of cancer survivors from the UK Biobank. It's over in the UK, and the Flatiron Health breast cancer database. That's a private company. I believe they're here in the US, showing that SARS-CoV-2 infection substantially increases the risk of cancer-related mortality and lung metastasis compared with uninfected cancer survivors. So they basically, we've got all that wonderful, great, exciting mouse basic science, but we also get an analysis of the data from the UK Biobank. In the full study, they're observing, number of deaths. They're observing this odds ratio of 4.50. And then looking at the other database, we're also seeing this nearly twofold increase in cancer mortality when tested positive compared to those who tested negative. So really kind of frightening seeing that, people who are cancer survivors now have this increased risk of relapsing after either getting a flu or a COVID-19 issue. I would put that as a post-COVID condition, having your cancer come back,
Sure.
And really interesting. And I know there was a great discussion on the deep dive could this be mitigated by vaccination? right? If you get a vaccine, are you going to get this IL-6 CD4 Treg driven? I'm throwing in CD4 Treg because they didn't actually do the FOXP3 or any of the cool stuff I would like them to do to characterize those CD4 cells better. But anyway, But all right, as we've been saying for 5+ years, no one is safe until everyone is safe. I'd love everyone to pause the recording right here. Go to parasiteswithoutborders.com, click on that donate button. Even a small amount helps. We are now for August, September, and October doing our American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, our ASTM&H fundraiser. Again, we're going to double your donations, hoping to send them a maximum donation of $28,000. Actually have the upcoming conference. Chuck and I and Vincent, we're going to be there. So maybe that'll get people to enroll. Maybe they'll come. Apparently they're going to do one of our podcasts as a formal part of their schedule. So
that's nice. Which one? This one or TWiV? Do you know?
Gosh, I don't even know.
We're gonna do a TWiV and a TWiP there, right?
Let's do a TWiV and a TWiP. We'll do both.
Yeah, it'd be great. We'll get local, at least for TWiP, we'll get a local person at the meeting, right? Who does parasitology.
Oh, that would be great. Yep. I'll start working on lining somebody up.
Okay. Time for your questions for Daniel. You can send yours to daniel@microbe.tv. Suzanne writes, I wanted to circle back to this topic and thank you for updating your approach to your quotations during your clinical update episodes. Over 13 episodes, you quoted 12 people, 7 of whom were women. I appreciate this very much. And she gives a list of all the people that you've quoted: Margaret Thatcher, Jane Goodall, Audre Lorde, Rosa Luxemburg, Adam Nicholson, Mon Mothma, fictitious person, but a woman, Mark Twain, Winston Churchill, Hank Green, Napoleon, Emma Lazarus, and Helen Keller. By the way, I'm a subcontractor for the National Science Foundation conducting research in STEM education, and I have no idea how we will weather this storm. All of us with STEM education grants from NSF have had 20 to 100% of our grants abruptly terminated. Now, keep listening to TWiV and being people's go-to for virology questions. It's one useful thing that I can keep doing anyway. Stay safe, Suzanne.
All right. It's so funny. I don't even think I consciously sort of started picking women, but even this time, actually, I picked a woman. So.
Hat writes and sends a link to an article and asks in CID, what is your take on this recommendation? The paper is Clinical Consequences of Delaying Implementation of Long-Acting Antiretroviral Therapy for People with HIV and Persistent Viremia in the U.S. I don't know if you know about this, Daniel.
No, but it sounds like a bad idea. I don't know if you spent much time taking a look at it, Vincent.
Yeah, so the problem is people who have HIV, right? U.S. guidelines recommend cabotegravir, rilpivirine only in limited situations.
Yeah.
And so in this paper, they project the impact of delaying this antiviral combination while awaiting trial data.
Mm. Yeah, it's always a challenge. I mean, I think just for people that maybe are not so immersed in the world of HIV, initially growing up in Greenwich Village and seeing what was happening there, and then being in medical school in the early 90s and training during that period of time. Initially, there were a number of medicines, incredibly short half-lives. I mean, AZT, a number of hours. You had to take it multiple times a day, a lot of toxicities. Initially, we were only using one drug and then 2 drugs. And then finally, we started using triple therapy, highly active antiretroviral therapy. And then we finally got to trial data where it really became clear that you wanted to start the therapy as soon as possible for several reasons. One is if you could start it as soon as possible, you could prevent this reservoir for being fully populated. Also, it's treatment as prevention. It's really the first few years when you have these incredibly high viremia when you're transmitting it to other people. So not only are you doing the individual a service by treating them early, but you're also doing the community and the population a service by treating everyone early. And then I think there's been some recent TWiV attention on lenacapavir, right? There's another That I have to say one of the drugs I'm most excited about. Given subcutaneously, it has a half-life, order of weeks, right? So, it's a drug you can give maybe twice a year. And it really is a shame when certain drug companies, which will remain nameless like Gilead, go ahead and charge like absurd amounts and really prevent that from jumping in. There's got to be some way to run the numbers where if we just start using a lot of it, you don't have to charge $14,000, a dose or something. So
yeah, it's $28,000 a year. Yeah. I mean, the countries that need it the most are unable to pay that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's great for treatment. It's great for prevention. I mean, the whole idea of getting just a shot twice a year and people not getting HIV, people controlling their HIV. I mean, it's really a shame when the economics really limits, horrible.
Anyway, so they model it. It's not good to delay initiation. Yeah. So these patients have viremia and they're treatment refractory. So this other combination has been shown to help them, but the U.S. guidelines are only permitting it in certain situations. So it's not a good idea.
No.
All right. Ephraim writes, I'm an avid listener of TWiV since 2020 and always learn a great deal, including from the clinical questions listeners send you. You have discussed issues around chickenpox and shingles vaccines several times, but I am still unclear about current recommendations. I personally have never had clinical chickenpox, and therefore around the age of 20, I had an antibody titer test which showed no antibodies, so I then received the varicella vaccine twice. I'm now in my 50s and have spoken with my family doctor about the possible need for a booster and or whether I should get the shingles vaccine. She had me retest my titer, and again, no evidence of antibodies, so I received the varicella booster. I will mention that I've had other titers, such as rubella, tested with normal titers. Going forward, I'm curious to understand if I should get the shingles vaccine at some point. Also, children who receive the chickenpox vaccine, is there a recommendation for a booster in adulthood?
Yeah, so these are some great questions. You're getting into kind of the subtleties. So we'll start off with kind of the straightforward, right? So, young kids, people that never had chickenpox, current recommendation is go ahead and get the chickenpox vaccine. For folks that had chickenpox, not the vaccine, when they were younger, the recommendation is starting at age 50. You get a first shot, and then 4 weeks to 6 months later, you get that second shot. So what about folks that got the chickenpox vaccine? Do they need, is it recommended that they get a shingles shot? So the idea is that it's so low risk that they're going to end up with shingles that there currently isn't a universal recommendation. The other is kind of an interesting thing in your situation. So you got your chickenpox vaccine. You're hopefully protected against chickenpox. It's attenuated, so very low risk that it's going to give you shingles. So remember, you don't catch shingles. Shingles is a reactivation of the chickenpox virus. So for someone like you, if you've gone ahead and you've got your chickenpox vaccine, you'd be at low risk. And generally, we're not recommending shingles vaccines for those folks.
Jessica writes, first of all, thank you for your tremendous generosity to us listeners with highly informed, reliable, science-based content on a regular basis, and thank you for the courage to continue under the very unfortunate circumstances. You are my science hero and an exemplary man in your dedication to world health. So my question today is about plasmodia and malaria. Another science channel is reporting a recent interest in trying antiparasitics with this disease, specifically cough, ivermectin. They say immediately that ivermectin is useless against viruses, thank heavens, but could Plasmodium be susceptible? Just wondering, because malaria has killed so many. Here's the link to where I heard this, and Jessica provides a link to, oops, sorry, it's just a YouTube video. So that's not really
okay.
A link.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the actual publication. So yeah, there was a large trial adding ivermectin to mass drug administration, and ivermectin does have an anti-malarial or anti-plasmodium effect. So it actually is a medicine that is being explored in some of these anti-malaria campaigns.
And finally, Amy writes, first, a big shout out to you both. Working in public health at the state level, I know how exhausting and frustrating it is to witness unnecessary illness and suffering worldwide. I appreciate that TWiV helps us envision a world we want to live in. I've heard Daniel on a range of platforms, including Fox. Please do more of that. We love you here at TWiV, but the message needs to be to reach a wider audience. Invite folks from the administration and the Maha movement. Go on Joe Rogan. Bernie Sanders did with great success. Catalina Hetelina, your local epidemiologist, Megan Ranney, Dean of the Yale School of Public Health, Paul Offit, and others, along with Maha supporters, have engaged in substantive, respectful discussions on the podcast. Why should I trust you? We need more of this in the mainstream media. Respectful dialogue, especially when there is disagreement, builds trust. We, and I include my own organization, can't continue to be elitist or shut down people who have questions about the government and medicine. My specific unrelated question: what are your thoughts on stellate ganglion block treatment for long COVID and brain fog? I haven't found any RCTs, but I did see a small cohort study that looked intriguing. It's also unclear how long any benefits might last. Thank you again for all you do and for keeping us hopeful.
Okay. Well, thank you. I will continue to go on, make my media appearances. And let me hit the stellate ganglion block. So recently I've been talking with Lawrence Perper, right? He's the head of our Columbia long COVID, post-COVID, I should say, post-infectious sequelae clinic. It's sort of evolving. And we actually we have funding, and we're going to be going forward with a stellate ganglion block treatment study. So what is this? So there's a certain group of folks that develop problems after COVID. It looks to be a dysautonomia, where you tend to have issues with not enough parasympathetic function, maybe too much sympathetic function. We focused a lot on trying to augment the parasympathetic tone, vagal stimulation, active breathing, ice baths, and sort of other things that we're doing. The stellate ganglion block is a way to pharmacologically actually inject into the stellate ganglion, which is side of your neck, and try to shut down some of the overstimulate sympathetic activity. A few cohort studies. There's actually a doctor that I know up in Anchorage, up in Alaska, with some common friends. I used to work up there. And he's done a number of these in folks that were having issues. There have been some notable individuals that attribute their improvement to stellate ganglion blocks. But at this point, small cohorts, and we're actually looking to do a proper RCT to hopefully get some answers.
That's TWiV Weekly Clinical Update with Dr. Daniel Griffin. Thank you, Daniel.
Oh, thank you. And everyone be safe, and I'll stop slumping.